Because the question that people are asking all the time, some people have been asking it since March of last year, when are we going back to normal? And what will that look like? And what will that look like? I want to introduce a word to you. I'm going to introduce a word to you called hysteresis. You got that word? Hysteresis. It's not the medical condition. Some people are like, I hear a Greek word. That sounds like what I have. No. You don't have hysteresis. It's just a word to describe the process of how things tend to, it's actually from physics, and then it got adopted by the economists. But basically it means how sometimes a recovery of something lags behind a little bit longer. So for instance, the great physics example for kids is you get a magnet and you rub it on a pair of scissors, a few times for a minute, and then you get a paper clip and it will still stick. It will stay magnetized. Even after you're not rubbing the magnet on it anymore, it will stay magnetized for some seconds or maybe a minute, and then suddenly it will disappear. So in other words, you're putting this outside force on the scissors, this magnet. And so long as you're rubbing the magnet on it, it's magnetized. But even when you take the magnet away, it takes a little bit of extra time for it to demagnetize again and return to its normal state. And so that was borrowed by economists back after the 2008 crash when they realized, well, okay, when things are supposed to be better now, everything that kind of went wrong is now fixed. Why aren't things returning back to normal immediately? And that's because they don't. The recovery lags behind even after the cause of it is over. And we've seen that throughout history as well in different ways. And we're seeing that, I think, now as well, where recovery is lagging behind. Well, what's interesting about this is you see this with 9/11 as well, don't you? Like, did we return to normal after 9/11? Air travel has never been the same, that's for sure. You watch some of these movies, right, like these romantic comedies, and they're running up to the gate to say goodbye, and I'm thinking, whoa. Someone would have nightsticked you in the knee, long before you got to this point, sister. All right, like it's surreal to watch these things now, and you're like, what world was that? What, is this fantasy? Like, when could you run up to the gate of a plane off the street and just say goodbye to somebody? That's, some people have never lived in that world where that was possible. But it, to a certain degree, it was. So some things after 9/11 didn't return to normal, for sure, and a lot of it did. Still went back to your job, still went and got gas, still had to wash your car, and apparently let your goats mow your yard. You still had, many things went back to normal after 9/11, and some things didn't. I'm not a prophet. I imagine the same thing is probably going to be true here. Now, I do want to talk about a story. I want to talk about a story of hysteresis in the Bible, where kind of something lags behind where it should be. And that is going to be in Galatians chapter 2, in verse 11. Galatians chapter 2. I always hesitate to dive into the middle of Galatians because Galatians is one of those books where it's not a psalm, where you just pop that thing open, find a verse, and then leave. There's no smash and grab with Galatians. You jump in the middle of Galatians and you're like, I'm in the middle of somebody's conversation. This is getting really deep. I got to back up a few verses and then a few more and then a few more. And then you start at 1 verse 1 and then get your way through Galatians, all right? So I hesitate a little bit. You'll forgive me if we don't go through everything here. But we're going to put it up on the screen. My buttons don't work, so I'm going to ask Lemuel to do it. There we go. This is how it starts. When Cephas, this is what Paul calls Peter, Cephas. When he came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. Oh, this is going to be good. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles, but when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the persecution group. Uh-oh. What is that about? I think there's another set of verses here we can get to, another thing we got here. So let's get to the next set. There's a verse, It says, going on a little bit longer, it says, the other Jews joined him in this hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy even Barnabas was led astray. And when I saw that they were not, Paul is naming names here, you notice that? Paul is naming names here. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of them all, Peter does not strike you as one who likes to be confronted in public, right? All right, I said to them in front of them all, you are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? Okay, let's talk about this. You look at Paul all up in Peter's business here. It's I said to Cephas in front of them all. It's like let's take down this slide. It's like Paul doesn't even know that Peter was this close to being a murderer not too long ago. He hit the ear, but he aimed for the head, right? Like he's not Peter isn't Zorro, like on Malchus's ear there, okay? He's and then missed. Paul doesn't mind. Paul is not afraid of anybody. Paul is just going to right up to him in that spot and say, hey, you're wrong. Why does he say that? He says that I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. I mean, it's like I opposed him because he was wrong. He had nothing to stand on here. And this seems like such a strange thing to have an argument about. Whether or not you eat with Gentiles. This is not a concern in the law of Moses. This is a concern the Jews of the day had. Right? They critiqued Jesus by saying, why does he eat with sinners and tax collectors? Your company is important. Your mom told you that, no doubt. Be careful who you hang around with. And they took that to the point where if you're seen in the company of these people, then they're going to rub off on you. And we talked about this a little bit when we got to Mark chapter 7. We talked about how Jesus wasn't so worried about them rubbing off on him. He was happy that he was going to rub off on them. That's how he looked at it. He wasn't going to become polluted by them. He was going to make them clean. And so it's interesting, though, to see now we're in Galatians. We're a good 14 or so years, 15 years after Jesus died and rose again. And yet here we have Peter. On one hand, eating with these Gentiles, but then when certain men come down from James, from Jerusalem, he would revert back to form and pretend like he didn't even know them. That doesn't sound like something Peter would do, does it? Oh, boy. I'm not trying to be too hard on the brother because you and I wouldn't do much better in his place. All right? But it sounds like what Peter's doing, right? I don't eat with them. You kidding me? I'm with my people over here. I wouldn't be seen with them. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about church members here. These Gentiles are church members. And the problem is whether the Jewish members of the church can go over to the house of the Gentile members of the church and eat there. We're not talking about just going to find some, random bad people in town and eating with them. We're talking about people in your church, Peter. Oh, Peter would have had no problem, except that certain men from James came down. Now, we're not told who they are. Presumably, the people who are reading Galatians are going to know who they are. Somebody's going to know who they are. And you wonder, why this big argument? Why is Paul standing up to Peter, up to his face in public, having this argument? Why is he doing this over who you eat with? Why not just pull him aside, man, and have a conversation? Why do you got to do this publicly? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that what's at stake in this story is nothing less than the entire legacy of Jesus. Over this one little issue. The entire legacy of Jesus. Because Peter understands that the gospel means there is no longer a moral distinction between Gentile and Jew. He understands that. But when certain men come down to Jerusalem, Peter would go back to living as if there was a moral distinction between Gentile and Jew. When Jesus came, he broke that wall down. But when certain men from James come, he builds that wall back up. So what's it going to be? This is an infant church. There's not that many believers. And what's that? Depending on which faction in the church is going to prevail here, whether it's Paul and his emphasis on breaking down that wall or these certain men from James, and their emphasis on keeping those walls up, this is going to chart the future of the church for thousands of years, presumably. A lot is at stake here. Jesus was, if you want to go back to that metaphor of rubbing the magnet against the scissors, Jesus was that magnet. And the question is, once he's gone, are we going to stay magnetized as a people? Are we going to stay aligned to what he represented when he came into this world? Or are we going to, given a little bit of time, revert back to the way things used to be before he came? That's what's at stake here. This thing that Jesus did, he came and he taught and he healed and he did all these things and then he left. And are we going to stick with him? Are we going to continue in that river, with that current that he provided? Or are we just going to get back to our normal human selves and say, he was a good guy. We believe what he said. But these walls are natural between people. And we need to respect that. Oh boy. Jesus is gone, and certain men from Jerusalem are here. And even Peter is anxious not to offend them. Help you understand, these are men from the general conference. And Peter doesn't want to offend them. I mean, you keep this in mind, guys. Peter is the guy who announced that even if everyone else would turn away from Jesus, he never would. Peter's the guy who said, that I would die for you. Peter's the guy who drew his sword to defend Jesus. Killing for Jesus and dying for Jesus are two different things, Peter. But, okay, your zeal is in the right place. This is that guy who drew a sword to commit murder in order to defend Jesus. And here, for the first time, it seems, in his life, we see people Peter is afraid of. And they're members of the church. I mean, Peter's zeal, he had zeal. It was misplaced, right? We all know that. Peter gets a beating because his faults are made known in the Gospels. Other disciples like Matthew were perfect, we know. But no, they weren't perfect. They just don't have their faults revealed, okay? So poor Peter. I'm not trying to pick on Peter, but the point about Peter is, this guy is bold. He's aggressive through the Gospels. And then here in the book of Acts, a few people come down from Jerusalem, and he's willing to change everything, to dissemble himself, to live a different way in order to disguise what he really believes about this. He has no problem eating with the Gentiles, but when these people come, he's going to pretend that he does. And you think, why is Peter afraid of these people? He's not afraid of soldiers in the garden. But he's afraid of these people coming from the general conference. There's something about that. How many miles are we away from the GC? The helicopter can't get here anytime soon. I could finish this first, right? Okay. All right. Just checking. All right. And because Peter was afraid of the men from the general conference, he was willing to hide or minimize or mask the gospel of Jesus. Sometimes, guys, we can be bold and firm when it comes to outside pressures. No one's going to force you to give up your faith. No one on the outside is going to force you to renounce what you believe in. They can do whatever they want to. You don't care. And you can be a hero for the gospel when it comes to people on the outside trying to push you around. But sometimes when it's people inside, people who seem like they're on your team, sometimes we can crumble. Peter was concerned about what these men from Jerusalem might think. Paul was concerned about what the Gentile believers might think. Their focus is in two different directions, right? What are these? Sometimes that's the problem with positions of leadership is you're worried about what the people right above you might think if you do X, Y, or Z. But Paul has his focus on the right point. He's saying, what are these people who have converted to the gospel of Jesus, what are they going to think when they see that when these leaders from Jerusalem are gone, Peter eats with them and spends time with them and comes over for game night and they play rook together and they have a non-caffeinated beverage together. But then when the church leaders come, Peter acts like he doesn't know us. What is that going to say to them in their new faith? What is that going to feel like for them? I mean, how long do you put up with that situation before you realize these people aren't practicing what they're preaching? I don't want to be around them. All this is just a bunch of baloney. Probably wouldn't say baloney. It's a bunch of unclean swine. There we go. Doesn't roll off the tongue as well, so baloney it is. You know, and you notice that these church leaders from Jerusalem, they emphasize certain things that Jesus didn't emphasize when it comes to the Gentiles. They kind of have their own beliefs that they want to prioritize. What they basically want here throughout Galatians is they want the Gentiles to become Jews. Even though they're all Christians, even though they all believe in Jesus as the Messiah, they want them to be circumcised. They want them to go through all these things that they had to go through in order to be considered good members of this community of faith. And so this is what happens when you belong to a church, is that sometimes you're going to have church leaders. You're going to say, you know, Jesus said this and we believe that, but we're also going to emphasize this. And then we're going to do things this way. And then we're going to focus on this particular doctrine and not this particular doctrine. Right? It's what we do as human beings. We emphasize certain things over other things. We don't change the doctrines of Jesus necessarily, but you know, this one's more important than this one. And we're going to explain this one to mean this and not this. You know, and we do this as human beings. It's what we do. It's what these leaders in Jerusalem were doing. Jesus never told any Gentile they had to be circumcised in order to belong to the kingdom of God. He never went down that road with them, even though Jesus himself was personally observant as a Jew. He never required any Gentile to go through these things. And yet here, after Jesus is gone, here are the church leaders, here are the general conference leaders coming down saying, hey, you know, this is how it should be. Not necessarily directly contradicting Jesus at all, but just kind of emphasizing things a little bit differently, requiring things that Jesus was silent about. And if Jesus is silent about it, I guess we can just do whatever we want, right? So this is what's happening. And what you see when you kind of take a drone, it used to be a bird's eye view of a situation, now it's going to be a drone's eye view of the situation, okay? We're going to get a drone's eye view of the situation. As you realize, what's happening here is the movement in this church in Antioch where this happened is kind of like it's pulling us back. Because if we listen to these church leaders and if all the Gentiles are circumcised and all of them do everything a good Jew would do, then what have we gained in the end? How far have we really come since Jesus entered this world? The difference is that we believe he was the Messiah, but we still do everything exactly the same as we used to. So you have this tendency. Sometimes when you have a great movement, when you have a great revolution, a lot of progress is made, and it's kind of like the wave coming up onto the shore, and then what happens? It reaches that kind of furthest point. It's going to get onto the sand, and then it pulls back. And so we have this moment in the Christian church where Jesus had come, he had carried us all forward, he changed a bunch of things, he made people's lives better, he healed people, he taught things. We came surging forward, and then he's gone, and then the church just kind of begins to pull back. And Paul is there on the beach, like cupping the water, saying, no, keep going forward, keep going in the direction Jesus was taking us. He didn't take us all the way there. He only had a few short years, and he showed us the way to go, though. We need to keep going in this direction. And you're cupping the water, you're trying to keep it going in that direction, and it's frustrating. But that's what's at stake here. Are we going to keep going in this movement that Jesus started, or are we going to retreat now that he's gone? That's what's at stake in this story. That's what's going on here. And the way Paul tells it is he's standing alone. Like even Barnabas is his sidekick, his Robin, is caught up into this thing, right? Who are these men that everyone is so afraid of them? What pull do they have, right? I mean, are they other disciples? Like who? Who could it possibly be that would have that would scare Peter into submission? One wonders. Paul doesn't name them. He does name James, though. And the fact that they come from James may suggest that they represent James. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe, maybe not. So to these Jewish believers in Antioch, these Jewish Christians in Antioch were basically saying to the Gentile believers of the church that if you want to truly belong here, you have to become like us. And Paul is writing this letter saying, and he's there in person, saying, no. If any of us want to truly belong, we need to become more like him. Your reference point should not be yourself. You shouldn't say this side of the church says that this side of the church needs to be more like them. This is not how this should go. It should be that everybody sitting here should be more like him. That's how we grow. That's how we go forward as a church. This story reminds us that when we encounter Jesus, he turns our lives upside down. Everything changes. God is among us. He loves us. He has freed us from sin so that we may live this kind of life that he has for us. But then as the dust settles, we can pat ourselves on the back and say, now it's time to settle down a little bit. Maybe I was a little too zealous before and I just need to back up a little bit. We are tempted to return back to normal, to worry about the opinion of certain people, to observe the religion of men and women. Let's not be too exclusive here. We all do it. And to give up the gospel even while we still keep talking about Jesus. That's the crazy thing about us. Like this is our natural state as human beings. And we have to be aware of that. Even if we profess faith in Jesus, this is our natural state as human beings. I mean, you look at through church history, when the medieval church played power politics while proclaiming the good news of Jesus, right? Like who was it good news for? The serfs who went to church? Like who was it good news for exactly? But we use the language, but it lacks the power. And in our natural state as human beings, particularly when we get into positions of leadership, is to keep using the words, to keep singing the songs, but to essentially neuter the gospel of doing any of the kind of dangerous work that Jesus wants to do in our lives. I mean, Jesus really wants to change things up, and we're scared of that. We're scared of the things he's going to do in my life. He's going to take me out of my comfort zone. He might tell me to step down from a position that I really love. He might make me go to a country I don't really want to go to. We're scared of that work in our lives, and so we want to tame that. So we use the right words, right? We pray, we make a show of it, we sing the right songs, but we kind of control it. We organize it to death so that nothing too unexpected happens. It happened in the Middle Ages. It happened in the early days of this country when the Europeans were settling this country, I should say, when the Christians who came over here were uniting church and state and punishing people in public for violating religious laws. You know, they were using the power of the state to do that. All while, saying you have to go to church on Sunday or else you can be fined or else you can be penalized in some way. And you think to yourself, who is the gospel good news for here? When church and state are united. And dare I say it, even after Adventists rediscovered the gospel in 1888, they still couldn't resist coming up with house rules about how deep you can wade into the water on Sabbath. Like, this is the natural state of us as human beings. It's what we do. It's what we do. When Jesus comes into our lives, nothing is normal, and that's good. Returning to normal is returning to the way that most of Christian history has gone, where we are in control and we make the rules and we emphasize certain things over other things. And we have situations where some people are more afraid of what the brethren at the top of the church hierarchy are going to say than they are about following the direction that Jesus had started them out in. As Paul writes here, he says that Peter drew back and separated himself as soon as those men arrive. And that's what happens. That's what happens is we just want some normalcy here, and so we'll be willing to draw back from the gospel and separate ourselves from it to produce some kind of peace, to produce some kind of control here. And this is why, friends, we need to be continually reminded of the good news of Jesus. Continually reminded of the good news of Jesus. That's why I like Brother Jeff, who's back there watching on TV in the Welcome Center. He'll hear this in about 15 seconds. He's not hearing it. There's a little bit of a delay. That's why I love it. Jeff is a broken record. If you guys have met Jeff, if you've had a conversation with him, he is a broken record. Hey, did you hear the good news? It's my best impersonation of Jeff. It's not very good. Did you hear the good news? Jesus loves you. Even our Wi-Fi password reflects Jeff. He's like, well, what is it? He can give it out. But it's just he just wants to make sure you know that you are loved by God. And we need this. We need this connection to the gospel constantly, because the moment we walk away from it, the moment the magnet stops, of Jesus' affection, the magnet of Jesus' good news stops rubbing up against us in our lives, then we enjoy the glow for a little bit. We still in that state for a little bit, and then we want to return back to normal. It's what we want to do. The moment there's not a force pushing a ball across the floor is the moment it will roll a little bit longer, and then it will stop, and it wants to remain at rest. That's what it wants to do. That's what we want to do spiritually too. We want to remain at rest. We don't want to be pushed around. That's right. We have never been truly comfortable as human beings with the idea that Jesus invited so many people into his kingdom. We want to draw the line somewhere, and wherever you and I draw the line, it's usually far short of where Jesus drew the line. The number of people we want to let inside the kingdom is usually a lot fewer than the ones that Jesus want to let inside the kingdom. Let me just give you an example of how that has impacted our biblical interpretation. Talk about the 144,000. We're going to jump to Revelation 7. We see that as a small number. Many Christian groups see that as a relatively small number, but I think that's because we don't understand what John is doing here. Okay, the nation of Israel, God's people in the Hebrew Bible, representing God's people, was comprised of 12 tribes, right? All right, 12 tribes. So there's three things that's important to understand about this 144,000 number. First, people from all 12 tribes make it. People from all 12 tribes make it. There's not a good tribe and a bad tribe, and you can just forget about Dan. People from all tribes make it. Not just people from all tribes, but an equal number from all tribes make it. 144,000, it's 12,000 from each. Equal number from all tribes make it. From all countries, we could say. From all walks of life, we could say. People make it from everywhere. Like, we tend to look at this and say, well, obviously, as an Adventist, I think 2 Baptists could be saved in the end. It's not going to be many. We think we're being generous by saying God can save anybody from anywhere, but it's not going to he's going to save very many of them. You know what I mean? Obviously 98% of the people in heaven are going to be Adventists and probably people I know. Right? But this isn't what's going on here. It's people from everywhere make it, and a lot of people from everywhere make it. And it's the third thing is 12,000 from each tribe make it. This is the same device John uses in Revelation 5, where he sees angels, and it says numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. Right? They don't have numbers like billions and trillions and all these things. So the best John can do is 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands, right? Just that kind of what seems to us to be small numbers, because we have a much broader concept of the scale of math. But for him, saying 10,000 times 10,000 is the biggest thing that he can possibly say. So when he says 12,000 and 12,000 and 12,000 and 12,000, this is a big number to John. Yes, it is. This is bigger than the population of Jerusalem at the time, probably bigger number than all the Jews who lived in Judea. I don't know. Ancient numbers are whack. There were 1 million people died in battle, and it's I know. Whatever. Tacitus says 1.1 million lived in Jerusalem, but that would be bigger than every city on the earth, and Jerusalem is not that big, so probably not Tacitus. But my point here is that to John, when he's writing this down, this is a huge number. Yes. We look at it and say, 144,000, that's like Peoria, that's not many. Right? From our perspective, it's not many. From John's perspective, this is a ton of people, and they're coming from every tribe, from every corner of the earth, and there's a lot of them coming from each tribe, all right? But we have a tendency when we read this text to be like, well, not very many are going to make it, guys. Not very many are going to make it. Why do we draw this line so much shorter than Jesus does? Why do we make the circle of the number of people who get in so much narrower than he does? Like, it's his business who gets in and who doesn't get in. And Jesus seemed pretty optimistic about it. He seemed pretty optimistic about the effectiveness of his work in this world. Man, he's inviting everybody in. He's inviting, and we can't stand it. Because we think we know something or another about who should get in and who shouldn't get in. We want to get back to normal, to the way things used to be before Jesus. You know, back when I was the chosen people. Back when it was, you all outside these walls were sinners and no good, and me and my friends are going to be the ones who are going to be saved. That was normal for a long, 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 long time. That's the normal that many people wanted to get back to, including some of these early Christians. Let's get back to that normal where it's just us. Because that makes us feel good. It makes us feel real special. I don't want to get back to normal. Now, if we're talking about COVID, yes, please, let's get back to normal. But if we're talking about our spiritual lives, I don't want to get back to normal, because normal for me is Matthew doing 99% of the work and only coming to Jesus in prayer when he absolutely has to. Natural for me is reading the Bible so I can figure out what sermon to preach, not so I can connect with my Father. Natural to me is not going outside of my comfort zone, of only planning things for worship and other things that I know we can do and I know I can have some degree of control over. It's up to me whether, or it's up to somebody else, right? It's all human-sized stuff. That's natural to me, and that's natural for you too. That's what your natural religion looks like. That's what your natural level of commitment to faith looks like. And I don't want to go back to normal. I want us to be re-energized by the gospel of Jesus so we get back out there again. And we don't play these games of like, well, let's kind of control here what things we want to emphasize. And I know Jesus said this, but that didn't really make a lot of sense. So let's emphasize this one over here. And let's make sure we only do things we know we can succeed at. I mean, man, you can have talks about evangelism and they got it all down to a science. This old school way of doing evangelism. They say, if we mail out X number of brochures, we know that the response rate is about 2 to 3%. So if we do that, we can expect to have 100 people here. So let's set up chairs then for maybe 110, 115. And we know, and then we'll have them RSVP. And we know of all those who RSVP, only about 40% of those who RSVP will actually show. I mean, like, we've got it down, guys. We've got it down, and that's how we plan these things. And where's the Holy Spirit in this? That's what the 10 extra chairs are for. For God to surprise us. And it's like, yeah, but 99% of the stuff, we figured it out in our own way. Because we know marketing, and we know all these other things to get people to show up to something, right? And it's like, man, there's nothing wrong with using best practices. There's nothing wrong with I'm not saying we should just go to let's just take one flyer and say, Jesus, do something with this. He can. We obviously should try. We obviously should plan and do these sort of things. But I worry when every component of my spiritual life is something that I have planned and organized, and it's something I'm comfortable with. Because if I'm comfortable with everything, then that means Jesus isn't in very many of those places. Like, I need him to stir things up. I need him to stir things up in my life so I can be scared. And I appreciate it because we had a conversation with Brother Michael a little bit earlier about Laura's trip to Europe. And for those of you guys who know, it was crazy. And it was, I honestly, I told Brother Michael, I didn't think she was going to make it. Because they were giving her a hard time about traveling. Even though she's gotten both her shots, she hasn't had 10 days after her second shot. She had 5 days. So they weren't going to let her get on the plane, even though she bought the ticket. And so she was trying her hardest. It was because of her layover stop. They wouldn't let her get from her layover to her final destination. And it was just a mess. They tried everything. She missed her flight. They were going to reschedule her, but then she was going to miss the funeral that she was going for. And it was just a mess. And I remember I texted her mom at some point, and I said, I think she's tried everything. I just, I don't know how this thing is going to go through. It was beyond me. I could not. I'm a problem solver, and so is Laura. If you know Laura, she'll solve your problem before you even know you have a problem. All right, she'll be over at your house fixing something at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, that's a little too much. But, right, she's a fixer. I'm a fixer. We fix things. We couldn't fix this thing. The airline didn't seem to be able to fix this thing. And I was texting folks, we need another round of prayers. We need to pray again. And I just didn't seem like it was going to go. It just didn't seem like it was going to go. But she's not here today, is she? God did it. I don't know how God did it. I really don't know how God did it, but he did it. And I'm happy that he did it because I'm glad that I had a moment in my life where I was at the limit of what I could do. And God just took it from there. Like, I love that. I don't want to live a life where I solve all my problems. Because I can't, first of all, right? But I love having a moment. And we talked about this, I know, a few weeks ago, where it's like I want to be at church where we go out in faith, where we crawl out on the limb and we say, God, this thing's going to break unless you do something. I want to have those moments, and here one was. I want to have those moments where you just look back and you're like, I have no human explanation for how that thing happened. It had to be God in my life and in the life of our church. I don't want to go back to normal. Normal stinks. Normal is boring. Oh, yeah, we like having control over things. It's true. But, you don't really get anywhere in normal. You don't really get anywhere. It's not exciting. I want this good news of Jesus to legitimately be good news to all of us again. To get us excited, to get us energized. Not to be language that gets weaponized as we try to control the church or try to control things as human beings do, but just to mean it when we say that Jesus' life, death, resurrection, and promise of a soon return is good news for all of us. It is good news for all of us. For all of us. For all of us. I want that to be true. I want that to be true, and not just in our heads, but in our lived experience as believers in Jesus as well. Not just words we say and sing and pray, but a joy we live with. Something that actually transforms us, that upsets the apple cart, that gets us out of our comfort zone at times. I mean, my goodness, I'm not going to belabor this point. I'm just going to say, guys, that everything is about crafting an experience today. You get your new iPhone. It's a joy to open that box. Let me tell you, anything. And more companies are doing this. You have unboxing videos on YouTube is a huge thing. People make careers out of opening boxes. But whatever. And so people talk about the experience of, like, sometimes you go to certain restaurants and they really craft this experience they want you to have. And now virtual reality is becoming a thing, and you could, when it becomes mainstream, theoretically, you could experience whatever you wanted. You could go to Hawaii and take a helicopter ride over Pearl Harbor, whatever it is you want to do, right? Hear the sounds, maybe eventually they'll let you smell the sea air, whatever. But this is a world that is eager for you to experience more and more and more and more things. And let me just say, the only experience that is really real is the experience you have in knowing Jesus. Yes, it is. And you can see things with goggles, you can hear things with headphones, you can watch TV and kind of imagine yourself in a place, but the only experience that is really real is experiencing what happens when the gospel of Jesus comes into your life. And it's the only experience you need to have. It is. Let's pray together. Father God, sometimes it's been so many years for some of us since we first felt that first love for you. We need to have that rekindled. We need to have that rekindled. Some of us, Lord, have indeed gone back, separated ourselves. We had the gospel. It freed us. But some of us, Lord, have gone back to that comfortable life where we can control things, or not too much is expected from you. Lord, forgive us for that. You are our God. You are our Savior and our Creator. How can we limit what we expect you to do in our lives? Oh, You can do anything you want. You who parted seas and healed the blind can do anything you want in our lives. We want to again give you permission to do that. To be yourself in our lives. Forgive us, Lord, for the times we put on blinders and we're saying, we're only going to follow you when you act like this, Lord. Lord, just be yourself. Go where you want to go in our lives. Take us where you want to take us. Teach us what you want to teach us. Just all we want to do is follow. All we want to do is follow. Show us the way forward, Father. Lead us by the hand. We would see Jesus once again. For it's in his name we ask these things. Amen.